It's really the worst thing you can possibly do is have property in your personal name, because it means that anything that happens anywhere in your life, whether it's related to the property or not, somebody can come after and take it.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 124. Did you know that 1 in 4 Americans will be sued in their lifetime? And real estate investors are targeted even more frequently. So what can we do as investors to protect ourselves and our investments? My guest today is Scott Smith, an asset protection specialist and owner of Royal Legal Solutions, which provides business, tax, and legal solutions geared exclusively for real estate investors. He has over 1,000 clients. His company protects over $200 million in assets. And through his different services, he provides advice to over 30,000 people a year. He's also a real estate investor himself, so he lives what he preaches. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Scott, tell us how you got into real estate investing and then how that sort of transitioned into asset protection.
Well, real estate's always been interesting to me as a business perspective, and it wasn't until law school that I ended up finding an opportunity to buy an ongoing business. So we bought the business and the building, me and a partner, for an auto repair shop. Now, it was super interesting because we had no money, so we bought the property, and then we had to figure out how we were going to grow the business. And so I got to figure out how we would, get into the newspaper for free and get a bunch of free advertising into that, which was an interesting foray and having to do things different to make it work. And so that kind of theme, I guess, carried over after I graduated law school. Was a high-powered litigator suing, major insurance companies for hundreds of millions of dollars with a firm I was working in. And when I decided to leave that, it was, I had to figure out what I was going to do something different. And to make it work, I had to be different. And so what I did is I started looking at real estate investment clubs around here and talking to those people, and they told me they needed help with asset protection. And so coming from the litigation field, we built out what would be the, kind of like the litigator's worst nightmare, so to speak, if they got presented with it. And that's what we do for our clients. We give them a level of protection that's affordable, number one, but also that's so strong that a lot of times you'll see that people will stop pursuing a lawsuit before it really even starts.
What is asset protection and why do people need it?
Yeah, the people that need it are the ones that, if you have property in your personal name, it's really the worst thing you can possibly do is have property in your personal name, because it means that anything that happens anywhere in your life, whether it's related to the property or not, somebody can come after and take it. Imagine owning property in your personal name is really, it's worse than like putting everything you have on a lotto ticket in a lot of ways, because what you're really saying is that if I'm ever sued, I'm okay being in the position that if I lose, people could take everything that I own, right? And so that's just not smart, really. So especially when the alternatives are so simple. When you can shelter those assets and hide them from people being able to find out what they are, right? And we use that with series LLCs and land trusts, et cetera, to accomplish those goals. But what I find is that a lot of people are either have property in their personal name and they think that that's fine, and it's not, or they think that the insurance policies they have are going to be adequate protection, and they don't really understand the role of insurance and the types of protection and risks that insurance actually cover you for, which is different than the types of risks that an asset protection company will protect you.
So because I know that we have listeners to the show who own real estate in their personal name, let's belabor this point just a little bit longer. Give me a worst case example that you've seen where someone has held real estate in their name and gotten into some trouble.
Well, I'll give you three quick. The first one is we see it. The most frequent thing that you see is that people will have a car accident that exceeds the limits of liability of their insurance coverage for their car, right? Once that happens, then what happens is your insurance company taps out their maximum, and now the plaintiff, somebody got permanently disabled or something like that, will then pursue you personally. And then they can, if you own everything in your personal name, that means they're taking all of your real estate assets, all of your stocks, all of your bank accounts, et cetera. Right? It's unlimited. And they can keep taking it through your whole life, right? Until you would do something catastrophic like declare bankruptcy, which is one of the top 3 things that you can do that people think is the most painful thing that ever happened to them in their life up there with divorce. So we say don't go down that route. Another thing that I've seen people happen with people is that they sell a piece of property, and after the sale, there's a dispute regarding that property. And what happens is they'll turn around, and then there's a lawsuit that'll happen because of that. And that one reason that'll happen, one case that I actually ended up representing one of my clients on was this exact case, and the whole thing revolved a dispute around what plumbing in the house had been replaced, because some of the plumbing had leaked and destroyed a bunch of the house while they were on vacation. And so some of the plumbing in the house had been replaced, some hadn't. There was some emails going back and forth. It was ambiguous on which plumbing was replaced. And luckily we had her protected. But if we didn't, that would have been a great case for a litigator to take all the way to a jury to decide, what did somebody mean by an email, and making a representation around the plumbing. You'll also see cases where there's breach of contract cases that'll come up where you'll get into a contract to buy a piece of property or hire a contractor or enter into an unrelated business venture. And that it'll go sideways and the lawsuit results, and then you end up getting sued, and now your whole portfolio is exposed, right? Unnecessarily exposed, really. So the idea of owning property in your personal name is even if, like most lawsuits are settled, right? But the question becomes also is like, at what dollar amount do they get settled at? And one of the big things that you look at and what dollar amount people are willing to settle for is how much can they get if they win. So if you reduce that number down to a really small number, that even if they win, they only get a little bit amount of money, which is what you accomplish if you put in an asset protection company in place, then all of a sudden your settlement dollars go way down. If it looks like they can take your entire life from you, and a couple of pieces of property, your stocks, some bank accounts and whatnot, then all of a sudden that settlement dollar is really high because they know that you have a lot to lose if you were to lose, right? So, and much of this is what things can happen that trigger it, right? That can be really almost anything because life is pretty random in that respect and what can result in a lawsuit, especially if you're in, real estate, which is the most highly litigated business in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also about like saying once it happens, what position am I in? And do I want to be in a good position and be proactive about it? Or do I want to be in an unknown position whenever something does happen? And then at that point, it's also too late. These things only work if you're proactive.
So how do we put ourselves in a good position and be proactive about asset protection?
Yeah, really, the best thing that you can do is say the minimum amount that you want to do is to put everything inside of an LLC with a state that has really strong asset protection laws, like Texas. I like Texas because it's very strong and cheap. Or you can use Nevada, Wyoming, or Delaware. All have different price points, but Texas is the cheapest and best, I think, value during your lifetime. And that's really your minimum. That separates you from the assets. So if there's a lawsuit that you get sued with, then people can't get to your assets, right? However, that's not ideal. The most ideal situations are ones where each individual asset is compartmentalized and that all of the assets and the company ownership are all hidden by using what we call as anonymity trusts. So we'll have an anonymous land trust that holds title to the property, and a different anonymous trust that will hold title to the company itself. So that way nobody can find out that you own the company or that your company owns any property or who actually that property even belongs to.
So you're basically hiding it from anyone who would come looking to see what sort of assets you have available.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you don't look like you own anything that's the first thing that people do. Well, maybe it's the second thing. The first thing they probably do is listen to the client and see if there's, the client just has any viable claim at all. Then the next thing they do is say, well, how much money does the defendant have? And if it looks like you don't have anything, or it looks like you have very small, then they don't pursue the lawsuit because there's not enough there to take. So that's what the game that we're playing with all of the anonymity is. We make it look like you and your company don't own anything.
So there's two things you just highlighted there. One is make sure your assets are in an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. And your suggestion is find a state that has very strong LLC laws, like Texas or Delaware or Arizona. And then the other thing is a trust. And what are the different types of trusts that and this is not to be confused with like an estate planning trust, is it?
No, those are different trusts.
Okay, so let's make sure we're clear on the difference.
Yeah, but put that idea of like an estate planning trust, we call those living trusts, and that's a totally different thing. What we're using these for are, we call them anonymous trusts. And so you'll have an anonymous trust that can own the LLC itself here in Texas, for example. And that will be on all of the governmental records of who the owner of that LLC is. So if it was the Worldwide Investments LLC, it would be the Worldwide Investments Agent Trust, would be designated as the owner of that LLC. And here in Texas, what we would end up using would be a series LLC because that allows us to compartmentalize every asset. And much like a parent-child structure is how a series LLC works. You file one company, that's the parent, but the parent can have as many children as it wants. That just spawns up itself with no additional filings. So you would put your first property underneath Series A, your second property underneath Series B, etc. Then underneath each series, so Series A will then have its own, what we call an anonymous land trust. That anonymous land trust is titled with the address of the property. So if you had your first property would be called is located at 123 Main Street. That's where your single family residence is located. It'll be titled and to be owned by the 123 Main Street Trust. And that trust will actually hold title to it per the deed records. Now, once that occurs, nobody knows who owns the 123 Main Street Trust because trust documents are private. And we call that an anonymous land trust. So the 123 Main Street Trust is in turn owned by that child Series A of your Series LLC. And the only thing people are going to be able to see is the name of the anonymous land trust if they search the records of who owns that piece of property. But because the land trust is owned by Series A, if a lawsuit results, only the assets of Series A are exposed. So only that one piece of property would be exposed, not property B, C, D, etc. And that's what we mean by compartmentalization.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. So you've introduced the idea of series LLCs, and that's something we haven't really talked about on the show. Could you explain that in a little bit more detail? Because I'm not sure I quite understand how the series LLC works.
Sure. So a traditional LLC is one filing with the state to create one company. And you can think of it as one giant bucket. And you can pour all your different assets, 5 different homes and a bank account and your stock portfolio, but it's all held in one big bucket. So for asset protection, this really isn't great because then a lawsuit involving anything in the bucket means the whole bucket is exposed, right? With the Series LLC, we have one filing with the state, but there's a statute, the law, that's passed with that state. And there's 11 states that have it and been around for about 20 years. Texas is one of them that does it very well. And, but we could set these up in Delaware or, anywhere, really. They're just more expensive. But digressing to the series structure itself, so you would file that with the state, the particular articles of formation to create the Series LLC. Then what happens is internally, the Series LLC, this parent, is able to internally create individual child series, which is really just a one-page document that creates an entirely new company. And we call it a child series because that's the legal way of looking at what's happening here. Because each child, Series A, for example, Worldwide Investments LLC - Series A would be the title of it, isn't filed with the state. It's only created by the internal documentation of the parent, Worldwide Investments LLC. The cool part is that we can take that Series A and use it just like we would any other LLC, but we didn't have to pay anything to create it. So now we're able to infinitely create new companies for liability purposes at no cost.
That seems like a powerful tool. It also seems like if you are in the process of acquiring and buying real estate, setting this up is a little bit easier at the beginning than if you already have, like in my case, I have a lot of different properties all in separate LLCs. It seemed like it would be difficult to go and try to put them into some sort of Series LLC because then I have, I'm disrupting the mortgage. I've got to, give notice to the township as far as property taxes. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So one thing I can tell you about your particular situation is that you probably have them set up in LLCs, and you probably have those LLCs with you as the designated member or connected to you, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you have that a pretty decent protection. You have compartmentalization, which is good, meaning like if you have one property suit, it's not going to affect the other ones because they're all in individual LLCs. But you also have your name out there, so people would know if they know where to attack. Right? They can know the extent of things they can attack and try to make arguments like piercing the corporate veil or alter ego theories that try to get after the LLCs. So you've alerted them that there's a big pot of gold if they're successful in attacking you currently. So what we would say is that's not good, right? We have the compartmentalization, but we really should go for the anonymity to be a part of that. And so we would transfer over that portfolio into the Series LLC with the land trust, and the transfer from a property that's held by an LLC into a land trust does not violate the due on sale clause. So any issues that you would have with a mortgage don't apply. And you'll find this is being much more in the case with people that have had personal financing when they're trying to move their property from their personal name into a protected structure. I get that question a lot because a transfer from your personal name to an LLC will violate the due on sale clause. A transfer from the personal property to a land trust does not violate the due on sale clause.
Okay.
So that's a cool piece you get to avoid that whole issue with the mortgage company. But everything else that's going to happen with the county, of course, that documentation would need to be filed. We're going to file a new deed with the county. If there's a tax assessor's certificate that needs to be filed, of course we file that to make sure the property is not reassessed in value because there's no actual change in ownership. The ultimate ownership is still the same.
You don't want the city to recalculate your property tax
exactly
taxable value.
And so we take care of those issues as well, right? I mean, and that's part of like the benefit of working with a firm that's like ours is that since it's all we do, we take care of everything from start to finish about what needs to happen to take people from where they're at to where they need to be without, complicating their taxes and without making the operation of their company, any more difficult, than it already is, right? I mean, any additional piece of work that you make people do with their life would mean that we probably wouldn't have any success as a company. Because most of the time, once people are like, if it takes any more work, probably not willing to do it. So we worked really hard to say, okay, it's going to take no more work than what you'd be doing as an investor. We're going to take care of all the paperwork, and once it's set, your life is exactly the same as it is right now, except for the fact that you have this awesome protection in place.
Right. So I think the key point there for people who like to understand these things and do them themselves to save money is that, well, it's really easier just to go to a company like yours that handles all of this from A to Z.
Well, the deal is, this is what I always tell people. I said, listen, anybody can become their own attorney. There's enough information out there where you could really be your own CPA and your own attorney. I mean, really, you could actually be your own doctor too, right? But probably most people would say, I probably don't want to, and I can't really trust it. How much do I really trust myself to do it? Because it took me, a few years to put everything together and streamline it, and you could probably do it, but I'd say you'd probably be better off focusing on how to make a better deal to make more money than it would be how much you would save and trying to kind of like halfway have a good system put together.
Yeah, by someone who does it all the time and knows how to do it right.
Right, because it's not like this is a simple 1031 exchange or something like that, Like these have a lot of legal nuance that go into what they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What kind of bookkeeping needs to be done with this type of, well, for any LLC, keeping your logs and all of that? What do you recommend?
Yeah, we use either QuickBooks. I mean, I have some clients that use Excel spreadsheets even, right? The important piece is that you just have an accurate accounting. I was saying, what are all the income and what are all the liabilities, meaning the expenses of the company. So for your individual LLCs that you have right now, you likely have individual books, or you have one book but different tagging inside of your QuickBook that represents each individual LLC. That's the exact same thing you would do, but with just series designations, if it was under a series LLC and a land trust. So really, if you're a diligent investor and you had 5 properties, you're keeping track of what is the income and expenses of each property anyway. So all you have to do is do the exact same thing. And it's our belief that you can actually do all of this even inside of one bank account, that you don't need 5 different bank accounts to be able to do this. Because when courts look to say what's to pierce the veil or an alter ego theory of what's going on, or legal commingling of assets is another piece that comes in here, they're not actually worried about the bank account itself. What they're actually really worried about is the fundamental question of, can you differentiate for me which money belongs to which company, right? Mm-hmm. Some people have separate bank accounts because that helps them get there to answer that question. But it's not necessarily required, because the accounting records could show you exactly which money belongs to which company, right? So in that same scenario works exactly the same way we would look to say, like, what if it was a property management company that was holding one bank account but for 50 different clients? You wouldn't say that now all of those clients are merged together, right? It's the same type of thinking, an analogous way of thinking to what we're suggesting that you could do with your asset holding company. Have one bank account, have a good set of books that differentiates the income and liabilities for each individual property, and then you're good.
So keeping your financials and your profit and loss and QuickBooks in order is very important. When it comes to piercing that corporate veil, what about just the legal books, like having the membership meetings every year and the resolutions? How important is that?
Very important if it's required in your state, right? One of the reasons I like Texas is because Texas has 2 great rules, and this is why it's such a great asset protection state, apart from being very affordable. Texas doesn't have an ongoing year-over-year fee like you're going to find in almost every other state for their companies. They have a one-time setup cost and no yearly fees. But the piece of it is saying, you would need to have your books in place to be able to differentiate the income that would happen for each individual property. And you can do that really any way you want. You could do it through a QuickBooks. You could do it through an Excel spreadsheet. But the great thing about Texas is that Texas will allow you to establish the LLC that would have no ongoing maintenance required to it. So you wouldn't have any yearly meetings, no yearly minutes, none of that, right? Once you set it up, it's good to go. And there's Texas is also a curative state, which means that even if you screw up something, if a lawsuit happens, the court will actually let you go back and fix it during the lawsuit. And then if it is fixed, then the claim, it dies.
So Scott, what other like horror stories do you have for us that illustrate how important asset protection is?
Yeah, the biggest horror stories always happen around people that have assets in their personal name, and usually it's personal name with an insurance policies that are in place. One guy I know personally, actually, he lost over $4 million in real estate holdings because of this. And what happened was that we ended up in a situation, not we, but I was his attorney after the fact to help him with it. And the problem he had all the property in his personal name, and he said, I got insurance, so I'm fine. And this was before he was a client. He was a client of mine while I was helping with litigation. And the problem was that he ended up with somebody with chronic illness due to a mold issue that was in the property. But it wasn't just one person. It was an entire family. And it was 11 people that were all living inside of this same multifamily property that he had. He had 4 individual units. So it ended up wiping out his whole real estate portfolio because the damages none of them are covered by insurance, because the insurance, when they looked at what the damages were, they said, holy smokes, this is really high. And so, insurance is in the business of collecting premiums and denying coverage, especially when it's high dollar amounts. And what they do is they say, okay, well, actually what you committed was outside of the policy for one reason or another. A lot of times they'll just claim that it was gross negligence on your part. So then they can completely deny coverage to you. Then you have to defend yourself, or this guy ended up having to defend himself against all those people. And then he was left trying to sue his own insurance company to get paid for it. Right? And it ended up just completely wiping him out.
And this is all because he had his real estate in his personal name?
Yeah, because if he would have had it inside of a Series LLC, or at least at the very minimum, that property inside of its own LLC, then they would have been limited to sue the owner of that property, which would have been just the LLC. But because he had it in his personal name and all of his assets in his personal name, they could go after everything that he had.
And conversely, give us an example of a client or someone who's done it right and was able to avoid having to pay up a lot of money in a lawsuit.
Yeah, this is back to that example I gave earlier about the plumbing, where we talked about like how can the plumbing result and where does the lawsuit get triggered with it, is that we had another client that had a plumbing piece that they replaced in the house, but they had the series compartmentalization in place. So what ended up happening is that they sold the property out of, say, Series C to the buyer out of their flip company, their Flip Series LLC. Then what happened was then the buyer wanted to turn around and sue them for something related to a different issue with the plumbing. And the lawsuit ended up getting dropped before it really even got started, because all of the money got paid out to Series C on the sale. My client then took all of the money out of Series C and out of that individual company. So really then Series C had nothing left in it to sue. And this same thing could have been accomplished differently. Let's say if there was an individual LLC that owned that piece of flip property. Once the property would have got sold, then you take the money out of the LLC. Then if somebody has a complaint, they can only sue the previous owner, right? The seller in this case. And that seller is a shell entity at that point. So there's nothing for them to come after.
And as we wrap it up here, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to mention?
I would say more than anything else is that find yourself some professionals that are in the same business that you are, no matter what you're doing. I hire professionals myself, and that's always my one criteria. We offer great consultation services to anybody who is interested. And so you can contact us through the royallegalsolutions.com website. You can email me directly at scott@royallegalsolutions.com, or you can call us at the 512-757-3994, and just get a better feel on what exactly it is that you need, because not everybody needs the maximum level of protections. And there's so there's opportunities for wherever you're at to just make sure that you're going to be taken care of.
Great, thanks. And I'll make sure that your contact information is in the show notes as well. So Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us about asset protection and the importance of having an LLC and not having your property in your personal name, educating us on series LLCs as well as trusts that are used to protect your investments as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. A really great time.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.